Hello, today I have a story to tell you. It's from the Epic of Gilgamesh. I don't think I can tell it to you in 10 minutes, probably take today and maybe tomorrow as well. Anyway, it goes like this. In a second video today I'll tell you why I'm doing this, but right now just listen to the story. There was a guy by the name of Gilgamesh. I say he was a guy, but he was no ordinary guy. He was a priest king in among the Sumerians in the city of Uruk, which is in Mesopotamia. And he was said to be 2/3 God and 1/3 man. He was full of energy. He was enormously strong. He had all the power of a king, all the power of a priest together. And what he was doing with that city was he was driving the people so hard to build the walls. He was so full of energy, the people could not keep up with him. He drove them to build the walls during the daytime, and then every night he expected them to party all night. Orgies every night. You might think, oh, orgy, that sounds like fun. No, it was killing them. They just couldn't keep up. So they liked him okay, it wasn't that. They were just not supermen like he was. Well, they went around him, in a sense, to the gods. They consulted the gods. What can we do? How can we slow this man up? And the gods met in council, and they decided here's what they would do. They would create somebody that was Gilgamesh's equal and put him down on the earth, and Gilgamesh would have to deal with him, and that would give him something to do, and that way he would be slowed up. So they created a creature, a human called Enkidu. Now he was very different in some ways from Gilgamesh. He was just as strong, just as energetic, but he was a wild man. He was all covered with hair, and they put him down among the wild beasts, and for a long time he ran with the wild beasts, ate grass with the cattle. Eventually people started to sight him, and word came back that he was there. Well, this got Gilgamesh's curiosity. He wanted to catch him. So how do you do that? Well, what he did was he hired a woman to hang out down by the watering hole. So when the wild beasts would come down, and Enkidu among them, to drink at the watering hole, he would maybe notice this woman and hang around. Well, it worked. Eventually he stayed, and he stayed with that woman for a while, and then according to the plan, that woman then headed back into the city of Uruk, and Enkidu followed right along. They went into the city, and they closed the gates, so they had Enkidu caught in the city. Now I like this part here, because he, wild man that he is, when he got in there, one of the first things he saw was in the temple, was beginning one of these wild orgies. And he didn't like what he saw. So he went there, and he stood in the door, and he wasn't letting anyone go in. He just didn't like the looks of this. Well, along came Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh, of course, wanted to go to his party. Well, Enkidu wasn't going to let him go, and the two of them squared off, and they fought. And since the gods had matched them equally, it was a fight that looked like it was going to knock the temple down. No one could get the better hand. On and on it went. But eventually, Gilgamesh did get the better hand. He got Enkidu down. But in that process, I've seen it happen before. It's odd the way this happens, but sometimes guys will fight, and they fight their way to friendship. And that's what happened. Gilgamesh so admired Enkidu because he'd never run into anybody that was even close to him, and here Enkidu was his equal, that he forgot about building his walls. And he got so excited about his new friend that he wanted to go off and have adventures with him. So it seemed like it worked. Well, Gilgamesh decided that they would go off and see if they could chop down the sacred cedar tree, which was guarded in a sacred forest by an ogre named Humbaba. They didn't know too much about Humbaba, but anyway, Gilgamesh felt that with Enkidu he could go manage to do this. So he had prepared for himself a special weapon. It was a huge axe named Might of Heroes. And armed with his axe and his friend Enkidu, they went to the grove to see if they could get the sacred cedar tree. Well, they went in unopposed. They got to the center of the grove, and there was the sacred cedar tree. Humbaba was nowhere around, so he got his axe, Might of Heroes, out and started to chop away, cutting down the sacred cedar tree. Well, Humbaba heard that, and he came rushing to see what was going on, and big surprise for Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Gilgamesh never dreamed that this ogre could be so huge and so dangerous and so powerful. And he didn't stand a chance, and he knew it, and he cried out to the gods, please, please help him. Well, one god did decide to help. It was the god of the wind. And the god of the wind summoned winds from all corners of the earth. And they all blew against Humbaba at the same time. And given that situation, Gilgamesh was able to go up with might of heroes and kill Humbaba. Well, then they chopped down the sacred cedar tree and headed back to the city of Uruk with it. Some versions say they had a raft and they had lots of trees to use for the temple. But anyway, as they were approaching the sacred, city of Uruk, Gilgamesh, at the head of this procession with this sacred cedar tree, looked so glorious that there were probably many women thought he's the most handsome man they ever saw. But more importantly, there was a goddess named Ishtar, the goddess of love, and she decided she had to have Gilgamesh for her lover. So that night, she presented herself to Gilgamesh, and shockingly, Gilgamesh refused her love. This had never happened. She couldn't believe it. He refused her love because he had seen what had happened before when men fell under the spell of the goddess of love. And he didn't want that to happen. He was too excited about his new friend and all his adventures he could have. So he refused her. Well, she was so insulted. She went to the Council of Gods and met and said, "This man is getting beyond control. This is unheard of." And the gods agreed. No human should be able to refuse her love. They had to punish him. So what they did was they sent against the city of Uruk this monstrous big bull called the Bull of Heaven. So big, with one blast of his nostrils, 100 guys would be knocked over dead. Well, he came, and Gilgamesh and Enkidu went up there against him, and Enkidu got behind him and grabbed his tail. And while the Bull of Heaven was fussing around trying to get Enkidu, Gilgamesh went in there with might of heroes and killed the Bull of Heaven. Unbelievable. This could not happen. The Council of Gods met again, and clearly these guys, Gilgamesh especially, was out of control. They decided one of the two was going to have to die. So they drew lots. Who would die? And the shorter lot came to Enkidu. Now, how do you kill him? Well, they just had him get sick. Little by little, he lost his strength. He got sicker. He couldn't keep up with Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh didn't understand because he was his equal. And he watched Enkidu fading and fading and fading. And finally, Enkidu died. And Gilgamesh mourned in heroic proportions. He went around the city wailing. He would not give up the body. Day after day after day, he would not give the body up. Until finally, he did accept that his friend Enkidu had died. And then Gilgamesh began to think about something that he'd never thought about before. This was the first time it ever occurred to him. If Enkidu had been his equal and had gradually lost his strength and energy and died, is it possible that that could happen to Gilgamesh himself? And he became obsessed by it. Do all men have to die? Is there any way to escape death? And that was all he could think about for a while. And maybe if I still have time, I'll tell you what he did was he sent messengers all out over the world to find out, is there any man who has escaped death? And he waited to see what the answer was. And that would be a good place to stop. You'll have to wait then until tomorrow, and I'll see if I can finish this story of the Epic of Gilgamesh.